The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be? The most TV dudes you'll ever listen to. As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess, we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to episode 34 of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. I'm Adam Pope, but I'm not alone. Like looking in a mirror, my identical twin co-host is on the mic.
That's right, I'm William Bruce West. We may be twins, but one of us is a studious podcaster, while the other is a real wild child. Try to guess which is which.
While you're busy trying to tell us apart, though, we have to take a look back at our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
Our show today deals with the lives of two twin sisters getting into hijinks. Adam, do you have a favorite pair of TV siblings?
Well, so as I was considering who it might be, my immediate thought, for some reason, it was just like total like subconscious, here's the answer, was the Powell sisters on the syndicated version of Charles in Charge. So Sarah and Jamie, for me, seem to be like this great example of siblings who were fundamentally different in personality, but they still got along with each other. They still, it wasn't like this battle all the time. They relied on each other. It was nice. Now, the thing that negated that was there was their little brother, Adam, who's the third. He was an afterthought. I thought he contributed nothing to the show, in my opinion, when I watched it. But that's also just because, I had a crush on Nicole Eggert. So I'm just like, why we got this kid in here? So my actual choice is Bud and Kelly Bundy. They are the best TV siblings because their banter is just legendary for TV writing, like their ability to roast each other. But then when the chips were down, they always stood up for each other, right? Like when Tiffany Amber Thiessen humiliated Bud, right? Kelly tied her up naked to a locker, let dogs attack her. They felt like a comedy duo in the best sense, like every time they were on screen together. And they were basically written to always be interacting. The kids kind of had their storyline, or at least their scenes with dialogue that were always fun, but then they also just felt like believable siblings in that way. Did you have another family affair in mind?
Not really, because you kind of took mine. I mean, you're right. I think I've mentioned it before, but like my grandmother used to love Married with Children, and like she's like over 80 at this point and has nothing in common with the Bundys, but she loved any episode where they fought. And it was like you were saying, like, yeah, they're all bickering at each other. They're all at each other's throats. But when the chips were down, they were a family and they stood up for each other, especially like Bud and Kelly. So that's my like vintage choice. I have a recent modern choice though that kind of caught me by surprise, but like I think they're awesome. If you've ever watched the show Blackish, they're not even like the youngest at that point because they end up having like a fifth kid, but they have a set of twins, Jack and Diane, which should be familiar to any child of the 80s. And their dynamic is just impressive because Jack is just a moron. Like, he's sweet, he's a good kid, but he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. While Diane is so smart, she's diabolical. Like when we're talking about Unhappily Ever After, there are hints throughout the show that she might actually be evil. There's things she may have done where it's like, oh, what happened to that babysitter? And Diane will just make a look and like leave the room, things like that. But when they're together, they balance each other out very well. And like I'm kind of doing like a rewatch of that show lately. So they're my like favorite modern siblings. And then there's like the pedestrian answer of like Ross and Monica, but they weren't great.
is Blackish the one? Is Mark Paul Gosselaar on that one, or is he on
That's
Grumpish?
that's Mixed-ish.
Oh,
There's three shows in the Ish universe. Blackish is the main show with like Anthony Anderson and Tracy Ellis Ross, and then Grownish was when their oldest daughter goes to college, so that's their A Different World. And
okay.
then Mixed-ish is the prequel about Tracy Ellis Ross's character growing up biracial in the 80s. So Mark Paul Gosselaar plays her dad in that, who is then Beau Bridges when we see him in Blackish.
Wow, I had no idea that Mixed-ish was a throwback show. So now I
Yep.
actually want to check it out. I kind of, modern TV very
Yeah.
rarely hits me. So now I'm like, oh, okay. How does it compare to the Goldbergs in terms of its retro charm, or Young Sheldon or something?
It has more to say
Okay.
because, like, think about it. You're dealing with, like, an interracial family in the 80s. It's only, like, the last 10 years where every Cheerios commercial has a biracial kid. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's old hat. But this had more to say. The Goldbergs is like, there's not a whole lot about them being Jewish. And even Young Sheldon, there's a lot of heart to that show. Like, they don't know what autism is yet at that point necessarily. They just think, like, Sheldon's weird. And it's so, like, dealing with him, making sure he's safe in this crazy world while the world doesn't know how to deal with him. Young Sheldon's probably closest to Mixed-ish than Goldbergs. I have a lot of issues with the Goldbergs.
Uh,
But yeah,
a discussion for another time. There's so
right.
many family dynamics on television. It's old hat, like you said. But we got to go back to the old days, Will. We got to figure out what was going on in the world of television that helped our show today get on the air and how it attained its green light. So, twins on TV have taken many forms, really, like since TV shows were being broadcast in black and white, which is kind of crazy to think about. For example, the Patty Duke show found the titular star playing both roles, right? She's identical twin cousins, which is still one of the strangest concepts. Why not just be sisters? But they used split screen technology back then. In the 80s, obviously, like the most famous twins on TV, although they weren't on the show, right? Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, they shared the role of Michelle on Full House, but everybody knew. The opening credits told you, right? Except for the some people who thought that it was Mary Kate Ashley Olsen was all one name.
I was one of those people because they did that deliberately. They didn't put an ampersand, you know?
But they had the split screen. I felt like that
Not
was
originally. That's
oh,
later seasons.
okay.
Like in the beginning, it's Mary Kate Ashley Olsen, and you see one kid. I was probably like in second grade when I found out those were twins.
And to be fair, I watched Full House more in syndication than I did, live on TGIF all the time. But the other thing is, once Full House got into the 90s, though, then they actually did have two twin actors playing twins on the screen at the same time. Yeah, Blake and Dylan. Is it Toomey Wilhoit? Do you know how to say that last
It
name?
doesn't matter. They didn't go anywhere.
It's true. They were playing Nikki and Alex Katsopoulos. But speaking of the 90s, this is where I feel like it really became more popular. Identical twins, because we had Tia and Tamara Mowry starring in Sister Sister, though just a few years before, Jason Priestley and Shannon Doherty had played, twins. Although I never thought of them as twins on the show. That was like brought up like the first few episodes, and then it was just like, they don't look the same. But they were Brandon and Brenda Walsh on Beverly Hills 90210. But this concept of TV series starring twins also continued into the 21st century. So, Will, what TV twins do I need to be aware of?
The best pair out there, which is Brittany and Cynthia Daniel from Sweet Valley High. I loved that show mainly because it's the lesser known Saban show. Like, people don't realize that because it was in like weekend syndication. But Haim Saban from Power Rangers also produced the Sweet Valley High show, which is why when Jason David Frank loses his powers as the Green Ranger and leaves Power Rangers, he ends up over on Sweet
Yep.
Valley High. And it's just kind of like, I know like our generation, especially girls, were like really into the books. Like, that's what you read after Babysitter's Club, but before you got into like Fear Street. But like, I didn't read the books. I was really into the show. That was my introduction to like Elizabeth and Jessica Wakefield. Those are the twins, but there were a lot of people on that show that you wouldn't realize who went on to bigger things, like Andrea Savage. Like, she's in a lot of like comedic stuff. I wouldn't say she got her start there, but like that's one of her earlier roles. So I was like really into them and that show. But like over time, Cynthia stopped acting. She became like a photographer.
Right.
But Brittany Daniel became the token white girl in every black production because for a while she was dating Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Oh.
So like if you watched any black, like I'm talking like white chicks, Soul Plane, all of this. She was even in The Game, which was a spinoff of Girlfriends on UPN. So like she was very prominent when I was at like a certain age, and she's still kind of doing those roles. Then she would go on to do It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as like a trans character who used to kind of like bully Mac, and now he's like in love with her. So like those are my twins.
I watched the show, but I never really like. We talked about Brittany Daniel on a very early episode with Swan's Crossing, right? So, like, she was part of that cast too. I recently just picked up a copy of Club Dread on VHS, and she's very prominent in that movie too.
That's my favorite Broken Lizard movie.
It's pretty funny, man.
I don't know why people like Super Troopers.
So yeah, but otherwise, like I really thought you were gonna go with a certain Peter Engel production that featured two twin brothers. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Are we talking about Malibu CA?
Yeah.
That was Peter Engel's first non-TNBC show. That was syndication.
Okay.
Because NBC was going in another direction by the time that came out. But everybody in there we had seen elsewhere. Belding's brother was their dad. The black chick who worked at the surf shop was from USA High, from USA. Actually, that was his first non-TNBC show, was USA High. But yeah, Malibu CA was syndication. I didn't love that show. And I honestly didn't remember they were twins. So you're teaching me something right now.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking around. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, but yeah, let's get more into the show itself and how it found its way onto television from the perspective of how TV networks functioned back then.
Yeah, our sitcom for this episode began its life as a mid-season replacement show, which is a series that premieres in the second half of the traditional television season, usually between December and May. Mid-season replacements usually take place after a show that was in the fall schedule was canceled or put on hiatus. If the ratings are good enough, often the series will be put into the schedule with a larger order of episodes. Famous examples of popular shows that began as mid-season replacements include Batman 1966, which replaced The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, Dallas, which inherited the time slot originally occupied by The Carol Burnett Show, Mr. Belvedere, who stepped into the space in the schedule left by Webster, Coach, which filled in for The Wonder Years, and Third Rock from the Sun, which took over for news radio on NBC. Adam, is there another mid-season replacement that went on to become a network TV hit that stands out to you?
It's an interesting phenomenon, this idea. It's like, well, this show's going away or something's interrupted production or whatever. It's just like, we got to put something in there. We got these other things in the hopper. We've had our feelers out. We're developing. The one that stands out to me is just a weird bit of finagling on the Fox network in the late 90s, because Futurama took over a time slot that was originally that 70s show in like 1999. But then Futurama got taken out of its own time slot by Malcolm in the Middle in the year 2000. And then like just Futurama in general was always getting moved around. But I never thought of it as like a mid-season replacement, because I was kind of like, well, but it's Matt Groening. Like, of course, I'm sure they just thought, well, we still got to test it, though. It's not exactly The Simpsons, or people are going to accept it. And it continues to live on so many networks and be brought back and all that. So, yeah, that's the one that kind of jumps out to me, where it's just like, wow, okay, things really moving back and forth. And all the shows were good in their own way, but it was just like they're getting moved in and out. But what about for you? Because I have a feeling you were probably more aware of these types of things occurring on a regular basis.
Yeah, mid-season replacements are weird because it could mean one of two things. Either they didn't think the series was strong enough to launch the fall because it's not really that big a deal now, but at one point in time, it was very important to launch the season strong. So you wanted your biggest hits. You wouldn't hold like Friends for January. Like you got to hit the ground running. But then sometimes there's a show that needed a little more production time. So instead of rushing it for fall, they're like, let's take our time, let's get it right, and let's put it on in January. My favorite mid-season replacement, the one that means the most to me and is near and dear to my heart, we're staying in the world of animation here, but that would be Family Guy. Because Family Guy launched in January of 1999. In fact, it was during that period of time where this mattered. It launched after the Super Bowl.
Right.
It was the lead out of Super Bowl 33 when Fox had the Super Bowl rights that year. And that used to be a big deal because they felt that like people would just be like lazy and full of wings, too tired to change the channel. So they're this captive audience for like this new show, which is kind of dumb because I mean, it's already like 11 p.m. and people want the news and all that other stuff. But like now they just throw anything on this. Like, oh, here's the Equalizer. Here's some Queen Latifah. But like before, it was like, let's launch this show because this is the biggest audience that will be on television this year. And I remember like it was, I'm not gonna say a breath of fresh air because if you go back to like season one Family Guy, it's very offensive. But like you were saying with Futurama, we really didn't know what to compare it to. Like, we hadn't really gotten into the thick of everybody trying to create their own Simpsons yet. At this point, we knew the Simpsons. We knew the critic. You know what I mean? But it was like, there's a littered graveyard of failed animated shows, which we'll probably get to if this show stays around
Fish
25
police,
years.
capital critters, yeah.
God, the Devil and Bob,
Family
Dilbert,
dog.
you know, like all those shows. But it was like, this show was the closest to The Simpsons, which would be kind of its identity for a while. It has that same Futurama trajectory of like, it was 3 years on Fox, got canceled, then Adult Swim made it a hit through reruns to the point where Fox brought it back. And now it just celebrated its 25th year. And it starts the Seth MacFarlane thing. I know it's an acquired taste and he's very polarizing, but I feel like even if people hate his animated stuff, they still love the Orville. You know, because the Orville is the one they're ashamed to be like, wow, this is from him, but I like Star Trek. This put him on the map, and that's why, like, it means a lot to me.
Yeah, so it's just you never knew what was going to come out of these shows, and so it's kind of a cool thing. But for every Family Guy or Futurama, there's a Boston Commons, and that one's just
I
not gonna
liked
hang around.
Boston.
I do too, but I'm just saying it didn't catch on.
Right.
What was that show the main guy was on later? Like about
Yes, dear.
Yes, dear. Yeah, but it's the guy from Boston Commons.
Which is funny because Yes, Dear was almost like a dumping ground from failures of other sitcoms because you had Mike O'Malley, who they
Yep.
really tried to give a starring vehicle to. They're like, well, just put them together. And what have we talked about? That was probably a talent holding deal.
Yeah.
They were just like, throw them together in a show.
See how it goes. All right. Well, Will, it's finally time to get into the details of the program we're here to discuss today. If anybody out there listening actually remembers this show, you were watching it live, we want to hear about it on social media with your elevator pitch. All right, so Double Trouble was a sitcom that aired on NBC starting in April of 1984 and starred identical twin sisters Jean and Liz Sagal as Kate and Allison Foster. Though physically identical, each girl had their own personality, with Allison being portrayed as the more quiet and responsible one, while Kate was the outgoing wild child. The sisters lived in Iowa with their recently widowed father, Art, played by Donnelly Rhodes, who was secretly dating their deceased mother's best friend, Beth, played by Patricia Richardson, later of Home Improvement fame. Now, in the first season of 8 episodes, the girls got into hijinks involving switching places with one another in various scenarios, really impersonating each other a lot, whether they were dating boys or doing dances science competitions or whatever it might be. But all the scenes either were split between the Foster family home or Beth's dance studio, and that was about it. Any drama on the series, most of it was derived from the revelation that their father had found love again with a close family friend, or just, the vast personality differences between the twins. That's what most of that first season involved.
Yeah, the series' initial 8 episodes proved popular enough to bring it back for 14 more the next year in 1985, but this time the show had been totally revamped. The Foster twins had now moved to New York City to live with their Aunt Margot, played by Barbara Barry, and 2 goofy aspiring male actors who rented a room in her home. Kate was now pursuing a career as a dancer/actress on Broadway, while Allison attended a fashion institute to become a clothing designer. The production values for season 2 were much higher, and the situations more outrageous than the previous limited domestic setting had allowed. The series did not earn high ratings and was not renewed for a 3rd season. It eventually ran in reruns on the USA Network, but was mostly forgotten by TV viewers. Adam, did you ever see or hear about Double Trouble in either of its incarnations?
I cannot believe that if it aired in reruns on USA Network, I mean, that was my summers. Just the 10 of us, my 2 dads. Like I was locked into all these old 80s syndicated programs that they had, but I never saw Double Trouble. I never heard about Double Trouble. I actually first got even an inkling that it existed. Katie Sagal, who is the older sister of Liz and Jean, she was being interviewed on Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and she mentioned that she had these like twin sisters that had a TV series. And I was like, what? I got to check that out. And now I already knew her brother, Joey Sagal, because he's in The Return of Swamp Thing, one of my favorite cheesy movies. But I, again, no idea that there were these twin sisters who had been in like Grease 2. Liz Sagal was in the fake band Cherry Bomb that's fronted by Leah Thompson and Holly Robinson and Howard the Duck. So I was just like, oh, had no idea that was her. Like, she's a chameleon. So this became a real fascination for me just over the last few months, where I was just like, I have to check out this series and I can't wait to talk about it. But what about you? Did you have any inkling that there was a show called Double Trouble?
None whatsoever until you mentioned it. And like, a lot of it probably comes down to the date. Like, if we're doing the Will timeline, outside of Knight Rider, I didn't know NBC existed at this time. This is my CBS era. Like, I'm still watching like Newhart and Murder, She Wrote and all this other stuff. Like, I don't discover NBC till like the late 80s. So like, no clue. No like, oh, I saw a commercial for this. And every now and then there's scant memories of like Cheers and Night Court and things like that. No clue.
Wow. So, I mean, that is very rare on this show, that it's something that's like totally new to both of us. And again, I am guessing to most of our audience, the show, the first season is pretty much complete on YouTube. The second season, there are only a handful of episodes that you can find, and you kind of got to go to different sources and jump around. So if you know anybody out there can get us the full second season, I would love to check in and find out more about Double Trouble. But speaking of which, we watched what we could find, and we got to get to talking about it with our cheers. All right, Will, was this a pleasant surprise or a snooze for you?
It's not a snooze, but it also wasn't pleasant. I would definitely say the second season is better than the first. Like, they needed to change that dynamic of like the domestic stuff in the suburbs wasn't really working. So when they moved to New York and it's like the bright lights, big city, which is something that like a show maybe would do in like season 5 if it was like long running, like they really didn't waste any time, and I appreciated that. But like, I also had a lot of questions from season 1. Like, I was engaged, even though it's like twin antics, because I found it very interesting. Like, just times change and just society's views change. When this show starts, that dude's wife has only been dead for 6 months, and he is dying to get in Jill Taylor's pants. And they're both like, I mean, she was my best friend. Could we? So I feel like we're supposed to be rooting for love, but we all, like, I'm over here like, yeah, maybe let your daughters get used to their mom being dead before you replace her with the
but that
best
being
friend.
said, they like we're gonna get into the twins and all they're involved with. 4 adult storylines that are not like the main story being promoted for the series. I found both the actors really to be engaging. I liked Patricia Richardson. I like this Donnelly Rhodes guy who's some sort of TV veteran, but I'd never seen him in anything before. And so I was just like, wow, I actually like their scenes together because whether they're flirting or they're just like confiding in each other or like, trying to talk, what are we going to do for the girls? I like their dynamic, and it does make you root for them because they're like, look, what we're doing isn't wrong, we weren't fooling around before, it's just naturally happened this way, and I like that.
I agree with you, and but also kind of like the time difference, even though I guess it happens now. Just look at Bill Belichick for you sports people. But there's a considerable age difference between Donnelly Rhodes and Patricia Richardson.
He has gray hair, we don't know how old he is.
True. He could be a Steve Martin, but he's got like daddy energy. Like, I see it and I get it. But it's interesting because what you point out, like TV execs, these guys did the opposite of what you would normally do. They took the most engaging characters and they were like, let's get rid of them. They're taking the attention away from these girls.
Yeah.
The money's with the girls, So it's like when they revamp it and move it to New York City, I find myself missing the dad and Beth. Because like I do enjoy their scenes. It's just kind of like there's 2 shows here, and I'm not sure the more interesting show won out, basically.
Yeah. In that first season, what impressed me the most, and again, we're going to talk about our 2 marquee stars here in a minute, but the writing on the show is so different. It's sincere, like it's not vaudeville punchline jokes, it's not pop culture references for cheap pop, it's all like character driven humor, and it's still funny, but it's like it's almost just the delivery of everything comes out, so you love the characters, the way that they're reacting to things, even if they're upset or whatever, and just that unique secret romance idea, I think having that built into the series is also very clever. But mainly I would just say it's the dialogue. Like every character does have a specific voice, but they're also very clever, and to me, like thinking of the shows of that era of the mid 80s, like it doesn't sound like a lot of other shows that I recall from that time, even though like the plot lines is like, oh, it's deception by the teenage leads, they're trying to get something by the adults, but then it's handled in a realistic way when the truth is revealed, and nobody's like over the top. Everybody's just kind of like, what, let's work on this. We're a family, so let's talk this over. Like, I'm hearing what you're saying. I wish you didn't lie to me about it, but let's get into it. And there's no like sappy, synthesizer music. It's not a Full House melodramatic moment. It just brings you into the world. Like with just 8 episodes, you're very invested in these characters.
I agree with all of that, but there's one other show of the time that it is like, and this is very important because this show was created by David W. Duclon, who also created Punky Brewster, and Punky Brewster was very much we're gonna deal with some heavy topics, straightforward but palatable for kids. We talked about this before. We fondly look back on Punky Brewster of like, oh, she's that spunky girl who wore clashing clothes and had a dog named Brandon. But there's a lot of themes of abandonment and like what it's like to be taken in by an elderly guy and like just finding your way in the world. It's more than just Cherry getting locked in that freezer. I see that here where they could have taken the Full House cheesy route, but they don't. Like, they deal with it straightforward and honestly, but still bring a lightness to it.
Yeah, like they somehow they're able to do it like so, like there's a finesse to it that doesn't feel like hard change. here's our message for the episode. It feels natural. Like the one that feels like a very special episode is the one where Allison, who's the more bookish one, finally gets a boyfriend, and then he wants to have sex with her, and so she's making plans for it. She's trying to convince herself, and it's like everybody kind of like advising her and worrying about her. So that, like, there's that, but then there's where they find out finally, like the last episode of the season is the dad telling him, hey, I'm gonna marry Beth and we want you to be in on it, and they get upset about it. But then, like, that's the one where I love how they handled it, because it's like they have like an argument with Beth. Like they're yelling at her, she's yelling at them, and she's no, we're gonna stop this. We love each other. We all like each other until this little revelation. Like we were on the same page. So let's just figure this out. Let's be mature individuals and talk about it together. I was just like, that's a great resolution. There didn't have to be more deception. The dad didn't have to come in and be more clever than all of them or something and fix it. They figured it out in a way that you would hope in that scenario it would be worked out. So I like that.
Right, yeah, because they didn't do the whole trope of like they brought in Beth and they hated Beth and like she was trying to replace their mom. Like, no, they loved Beth up until that point, because like Beth had always been in their lives. She was their mom's best friend, and they were like always at her dance studio. Like, for all practical purposes, they loved Beth as Aunt Beth. They just didn't want her as stepmom Beth because mom had just died,
Yeah.
Do we ever find out, because like you said, not everything's available. Do we know what happened to their mom? Because I can't find the pilot. Like the earliest episode I can find is number 2. I always want the pilot because so many things change, recastings, things like that. But I'd be curious to know if there was a very special episode about that. Mainly because when you mentioned Full House and like how cheesy it was, I always feel like the one time or whenever they felt like, okay, we're putting the cheese on the shelf, was whenever they dealt with the death of the mom. There's not a lot of laughs in those episodes.
No.
Even when like the old Greek grandpa dies and all that other stuff. It's like, yeah, it's laughs balanced by like, but like when they dealt with the mom and like, because it's fairly recent in that show. She hasn't been dead long before the pilot. Just like weirdly in Fuller House, DJ's husband hasn't been dead that long before it kicks off. So it's like you kind of need this recency of like, okay, things are about to change, but I never felt that here. Maybe it's in the pilot, but like I kind of felt like we hit the ground running here. You wouldn't know that mom recently died because the new status quo was maybe the same as the old status quo. Like everybody seems to know their place in their relationship by episode 2.
Yeah, and that is true. And the pilot episode would probably be helpful, but going into season 2 with the revamp, they don't mention the mom at all. In fact, they barely talk about their dad. When I read the episode descriptions, he shows up for the very last episode. So like it's still the same continuity and everything. But other than that, like the revamp is interesting because the style, I always use this example, but it is so like almost exactly the same, which is the first season is so like early 80s NBC where everything is like drab and dark and earth tones and everybody's wearing preppy sweater vests and whatever. And why is everything so dark here? And then when it could do the revamp, it's bright. Everybody's wearing neon. I mean, this is 1985. Like they get a new, like the original theme song I really liked for the first season. It sounds like a Go-Go's B-side track for one of their singles. It's just kind of got this pop punk edge to it that I really like. But then the second season is just saxophone music, and it's just pictures of them all around New York. It's a very new vibe to it. But like you say, it improves on the comedy. Like the first season is fun because I would say 100% the twins. They are the ones who bring all the energy. Like Liz and Jean are very fun. Obviously they're sisters. They're very comfortable together on screen. But like the first season, they really do play against each other in a fun way. If I had seen this show when I was a kid, I would have a crush on them to this day. Like I would have been like, oh, I love the twins from Double Trouble. Like they're so cute. They're so fun. But like now I just say they liven up every scene they're in. Like they're so so energetic and fun, and they can play both sides. It's not like their only personality is they also offer the drama when they need to, and it feels real.
Yeah. One quick question. Is there a time jump between, like, is it implied? Because I don't think they're high school seniors in season one, but suddenly they're on their own in New York City. Or is this one of those deals where it was like they were older than their characters? So then, like, season two, they're just allowed to play their natural age, one of those situations.
That's what I think, because they do look younger though in season one than in season two. So it feels like just actually there was some sort of time jump. Like maybe the show didn't premiere until 84, but maybe they shot it earlier. We should say that they have a very famous television producer who is their godfather, which is Norman Lear. So he is the one who kind of pushed this into production, came up with a concept, which is very much just them, because another element of the show, which I enjoy, especially for the 80s of it all, is that they are dancers. Like that was the thing, right? It was aerobics and it was dancing. Like that's what 80s girls were all about. Like, I'm going to be on Broadway and be a dancer. I was just like, really? Like that's the aspiration? But so like there's so many scenes of them doing dance routines, or again, competing in dance and all of that. But that was something they did in real life. I watched all these interviews of them on like the Tonight Show and the Merv Griffin show when this came out, and they were promoting it. And like that's they're saying, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, Jean like went to Asia and was part of a dance troupe there. We've just always been super involved in dance. They were Doublemint twins in a commercial, also, and things like that. So like they just have those skills, and it's just like, well, let's just work that into the characters. But yeah, so I just feel like to build a show around them, it wasn't just like they're cute. It's more just like they're a full package.
I love how, like, you were talking about, though, the different energy in season two. There's just certain things that were done. Like, it's funny looking back because the world was in the thick of it and didn't necessarily notice it. But I was talking to my friend Mike about this last night, actually, where NBC shows, there came a point where you just went to New York. Like, that was the thing. Like, they did it here. Give me a break. Nell Carter. That whole show is she's like raising this police chief's kids. And then suddenly, late in the series, she decides like, oh, my friend Addie and I are gonna move to New York. And that's where the Lawrence brothers come in, Like, people forget, it wasn't Blossom. We were introduced to Joey Lawrence on Give Me a Break.
Oh, yeah.
Or there was like when Disney bought ABC and everybody had to go to Disney. But the thing that always stands out to me is like the 85, 86 TV season where everybody got the theme song remix. Like everybody got that 80s theme song, which was either saxophone, synth, and or electric guitar. And every show did it. So I just feel like NBC got the memo and was like, well, everybody's going to New York this season. Let's just do that to the show.
Yeah. And I mean, like, they are funnier. Like, it is like a higher energy in the second season. Whereas I feel like the first season, they definitely were trying to play more like, again, like the sincerity, like the emotional nature and like the lovable nature. You love this family. You trust them. They're like the neighbors next door that you appreciate, Whereas in the second season, it's like, we're wild girls in the city. We're going to have some fun. And hey, here's these goofballs that live with us. And maybe they're a cheer, maybe they're a jeer. I don't know. But like those guys are doing a lot of, a lot of bits, just to bring some extra comedy to the series. So I just feel like also ultimately just the fashion makes the biggest leap. Like you see them, like I said, they got the giant bows in their hair, or they just have like all these looks. I was like, they were doing that in 85. Like I'm thinking of later seasons, late 80s Facts of Life, where it feels like, once they get their store and everything and the fashion updates and all of that, Jo gets her crazy haircut. Nancy McKean's wearing these long like suit jackets with the shoulder pads and stuff, like all that. Like that's what this feels like all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, okay. Like they're very contemporary, but they may have been like slightly ahead of the game too.
You don't get more exciting than New York City in the 80s. I romanticize that era. Like I'm one of those people, like I'm living in Maryland outside of DC, but I'm down here like Giuliani cleaning up Times Square because I love muggers and villains in Times Square. Like people are like, could you go back to any timeline? Times Square, New York City, 1984. 4. I want that energy of I could be just knifed at any time. And that's what they're living amongst. Like, yeah, there's fun, there's nightclubs and all this, but there's a danger, there's an excitement to it.
Wow. But yeah, but like ultimately, like the second season is fun. This whole series was just so enjoyable to discover. Like I was so happy that there wasn't cringy stuff that I noticed. There wasn't a lot of like goofiness that didn't age well. It felt like a solid series that still would have held up if it had gotten a little bit more time. But it wasn't all roses. It wasn't all perfect. So why don't we check in with our jeers?
Boo! Boo! Boo!
All right, so obviously it didn't last, Will. Is there something you put on it that says this is why?
I think twin antics get old fast. Like, I watched all of Sister Sister, and I don't remember that many twin antics because I feel like they hit a point where like the stories kind of got more varied than like, hey, let's switch outfits to trick a boy. But also, I had a crush on Tamara because she was the cuter one. Yes, there is a cuter one. So like, it's the same here. Like, I'm watching this show, and I'm just like, how many times are y'all gonna trick a boy? How many times? Like, twin antics just get old fast to me.
I
There's
mean,
gotta
really,
be
like
more
in
to
the
it.
second season, it hits its zenith when it's like, what else can we do? Oh, she's going to be the assistant to a magician. And then the magician does a teleporting trick, but he doesn't know how to do it anymore because he's terrible at being a magician because he's too old. So to not make him feel bad, she's going to convince her sister to dress up like her and appear on the other side of the stage in the box. Twin antics. Like
It-
they really ran dry.
But also, you were saying there's like a difference between them. I don't find that. Like, I don't find like they're
Well,
kind of
in the
just.
first season, there is. By the second season, they're same level of energy, same level of jokes. They literally, like in the first season, you have the Kate character always has her hair down or like up in a kind of a crazy way, and then the Allison character always has her hair in a ponytail or with a headband or something on.
And that's how you got to keep track because that's how they
Yeah,
would trick boys. Like, oh, it's the ponytail, so it's that one. I didn't get the rules down early, but I just got it felt like two of the same girl. Where, like,
Mhm.
to go back to Sister Sister, Tia's the neurotic smart one, and the neuroses made her not as pretty to me. And then Tamara was the wacky, wild, cute one, and like you could keep them apart. And then when they got boyfriends, like steady boyfriends, that sort of helped because they had some guy who would balance them out. Like, I didn't feel like their world got big enough to really like make them stand out themselves. And you're mentioning those like guys they brought in, but there was that whole thing in the 80s where they would just get some D-level comedian who won Star Search and like make him a wacky neighbor, So it was like, I've seen this before, but
Yeah,
like
they
this
feel
isn't
like,
really.
to use one of your famous comparisons, they're great value bosom buddies. Like that, it
Yeah.
feels like that's who they tried to bring in, or they're like two Bubbas from Mama's Family, like just like they're just two generic white guys that like think they're funny, and that's the joke is they are entertaining themselves.
And it's worth pointing out that at this point, Bosom Buddies is the great value Bosom Buddies. It's like we look back and we're like, Tom Hanks and Peter Scolari, nobody cared about that show.
Yeah, but like that's the other part too, is I feel like in the first season there was like this one like steady boyfriend of Kate that she has, this guy Michael. I didn't think he was that great. They tried to bring in like kind of another friend girl, and she would only show up every once in a while. She wasn't that entertaining. So I just feel like the supporting cast, especially in the second season, aren't as strong. Like it's Barbara Barry as Aunt Margot. I know Barbara Barry is like also like a veteran actress of the time, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't know that she's that interesting. I don't feel that she shows love to them the way their dad obviously did. And in fact, there's an episode where they take her like on a camping trip that she wants to go on, or they're supposed to take her to a cabin. They end up in an RV. That's the joke. And all this bad stuff happens. And they kind of address that directly. They're like, you don't seem that interested in us. Like, you help us, you let us live in your house and all this stuff. We'd like for you to, like, if you're our aunt, we want you to be more involved in our lives. And she's kind of like, well, well, I don't know. I've lost people in my life. Maybe I know you're gonna leave and grow up and go on to your lives and all that. And she's like, so it was like on purpose, but it hurt the show that she was at a distance. She was like, she felt like a headmistress at a school, not a family member. And I will say within that, the twins bicker a lot more in season 2. Like they argue with each other, which was not part of the first season, except for like one special episode where Allison wanted to be separate from Kate. I don't know. I felt like that Aunt Margot character didn't work for me as an authority figure.
Yeah, you can't go halfway, especially at that point. A good like example is the Facts of Life. Like you gotta be Mrs. Garrett, who like was basically their mom,
Yeah.
or if you're gonna you don't replace Mrs. Garrett with a Mrs. Garrett. You get Cloris Leachman, who she's aloof, but she makes sure the bills are paid. And at the end of the day, she like loves and cares about you. But like this chick was kind of in the middle where it's like, I'm letting you live here because like we're blood, but like, try not to make too much noise when you come in. It's like she's not maternal. She's not wacky enough to be aloof and funny. So it's just kind of like, it's wasted potential.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like we say, there is more energy, there is more comedy in the second season, but I think it felt like a lot of like network notes, like here's how we want to improve it. It made it generic. Like it kind of now it started to feel like every other show, including, hey, let's get a cameo by Mindy Cohn from The Facts of Life. We've been talking about her this whole time, but she comes in, to an episode where she's stealing Allison's fashion designs for other classes and stuff, which whenever Mindy Cohn would show up in a guest role, she was always up to no good. When she was on Charles in Charge and she's Buddy's sister, Bunny, were they twins? I don't know if they were twins, but there was Bunny and Buddy Lembeck, and she shows up, but she's like on drugs, or whatever, and she's like trying to get clean, or she's hiding it, needs to get clean. But like she was always up to no good. She just wanted to get away from her Natalie character on any other sitcom.
I feel like Mindy Cohn's one of those celebrities that benefited from coming up in a non-internet age, because I think there's like this dark side to her we don't know. Because did you know this always blows my mind? She is the godmother to Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's kids.
Huh.
And it's like, how did those paths cross?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, Brad Pitt was a guest star in everything before he became Brad Pitt. But I'm just like, Mindy Cohen's kept a low profile for a very long time.
She's just been Velma for the last 20 years.
Velma. And even now, that's getting phased out because they do Kate McCucci a lot, So I'm just kind of like, where's that Netflix documentary?
The Mindy Cohn story, for sure. Yeah, well, and speaking of that Brad Pitt, there was one other episode that kind of jumped out at me, but it was another case of like, oh, we're going to do the rock star episode. Because I remember this Growing Pains, I think it was, where Brad Pitt played a rock star that like the youngest boy, but he wants to go like backstage to meet his hero rock star, and the guy's kind of a jerk to him and it breaks his heart, and I'm pretty sure it was Brad Pitt playing the rock star in that episode. But it's kind of a similar thing where like Kate wants to be in the show, and then like she meets this rock star who's let fame go to his head type thing, but she gets to go on tour with him. But that's the drama of the episode, is she's gonna leave, you're gonna leave, it's just like, that's an opportunity I can't pass up, and all this stuff. But it was just like, there were just certain tropes in the 80s, like you had to do the camping episode, like you've said in the past, you had to do the rock star episode, because like when we did Good Morning Miss Bliss, we had our Stevie episode. Like there's always the rock star comes to town.
I was hoping the rock star would go the Johnny Dakota route.
No, not quite.
Like, it's this cool thing called cocaine.
But that being said, like it's not a jeer. We talked about the production values going up. I will say, like, that is one cheer I failed to mention, is in season 2, they have so many more sets. They do so many more things. Like they have a full rock concert sequence with Kate on stage dancing and singing and doing a whole thing there. Plus, like, they also would license music and do music video montages, which technically are a jeer to me because now they seem really hokey and cheesy. But at the time, this is peak MTV. So when they have, this is a song that was licensed anywhere to anyone, but time after time, Cyndi Lauper, like there's a whole montage of like Allison looking sad and all around New York, and sitting in parks and stuff, and that song's playing. They did like really do everything they could to get people's attention. But again, to me, I feel like it cheapened the series a little bit. Like it was just kind of like, we're selling out, we're giving you everything you want, right? This is what you like.
See, I didn't know about the music video montage things, which now explains why we can't find it.
Oh, that's
that's what has screwed over so many shows, where it's like people upload them and then they get the copyright strike. And
so time after time
worth...
is no copyright concerns with that one, apparently.
But yeah, that's why we can't find it.
Oh, that makes so much more sense now.
Well, it's just like, this is a sidebar, but it's insane how that has sort of hampered media. Like, there is a current complete series set of Baywatch that was released where I've heard some episodes are now as short as 30 minutes because of everything they've had to chop out from music rights.
Well, yeah, because it's on Tubi. Like, you could watch the Baywatch episodes, you can stream them. But yeah, all the episode lengths are different lengths. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I want the original. Apparently, there's no original Saved by the Bell out there because every collected one's the syndicated cuts. And it's like, I don't remember what they cut from NBC 30 years ago.
Nobody does. And we've only most everybody discovered in syndication. But yeah, so we are at a place where the show, gets basically a season and a half. I mean, neither of those were even full season orders. They never got 22. It's like 22 total between two seasons. So we got to ask ourselves, what could have been done to save it then? Or what could be done to revive it now as the show doctors? All right, so are you coming into this with your standard, here's what I would have done then, here's what I would have done now, or is there a different tact for you? Just one way to go?
One way to go, and it's then. Ain't nobody got time for twin antics now. But I'm just no, what I would have done then, I'm very kind of fascinated by the industry this came up in, because to me, first off, I wouldn't revamp it or anything like that because it had just gone through that. That's like a trigger you can't pull twice. And they did it earlier than most shows, but I don't see how this didn't go to first run syndication. This is when that happened. They could have gotten it to 100 episodes. One thing we didn't really talk about in the beginning was the benefit I have always seen for being a mid-season replacement is networks don't have a ton of data on your performance to figure out how well you did. So it's almost a guarantee you're gonna get renewed for the fall. You have to really tank. If you're a show that starts in the fall, you have to launch and end strong, because if you end in January, that recency effect, nobody's gonna remember you in May when they're announcing the new schedule unless you were the hit of the fall. But if you launch in January and you end in May, the network's well, we don't really know one way or another, just give them 22 episodes, So it's they didn't even get that. They didn't even get a full network order for 1984. That's so weird to me that nobody thought, hey, we could just do this at the studio level and sell it into first run syndication, because that's starting to, I'm not even going to say it's starting to get off the ground. It's pretty strong at this point, because looking at this show, even though I hate the twin antics and all that, it reminds me a lot of Out of This World, where it would easily just be mindless syndicated TV. It's very 80s, it's very of the time. You would look back at the fashions as a time capsule, but ultimately, this could easily have done 80 episodes comes on every Saturday after, like, I don't know, American Bandstand or something, Solid Gold, and like it would have been fun, and we'd still be having this episode because even after 80 episodes, no one would remember it. But it just seems like they left money on the table. This easily could have just survived as it was. I would give them more of an ensemble cast, get them another female friend. They gotta have that one place to hang out, which is the Angel Grove Gym and Juice Bar, but we'd call it something like the Live Wire, which is like a hip. Like maybe they could do song and dance numbers there, like in Kids Incorporated.
You know what?
But
I just remembered there is one cringe factor of this show, and it was the friend that they tried to put into it. Because I just remembered in season 2, there is this like female friend that is at the Fashion Institute that's hanging out with Allison a lot. And she's doing this very heightened Latin accent. And I do not believe the actress was Latin. You know what I'm saying? And so like she's like the hyper Latin girl, like that's always talking. And that's the one thing I guess that may not have aged well. But yeah, like I would agree with you that if they could just expand the world a little bit, because it was on the right track. It is an enjoyable show. Like the little things we pointed out are just like nitpicks and part of being too smart for TV now. But for the time, it was a very enjoyable show. And I still say the two leads carry the show, even if it does just become ridiculous, like, and super, you know, hyper comedy. Like it's almost like Women of the House, where like, look, that show is crazy wild and it's so of the time, but you could tell Delta Burke is just like top of her game, having so much fun. And these gals were having a great time on screen together. And I feel like they were written well enough that you just were always kind of like, okay, this is still fun. Like I still want to tune in and see what's going on here. So that works. However, I was trying to think, what if we were going to open this up to a modern audience? You said there's no time for twin antics. I believe that. Not a lot of people have a sense of humor these days. I will say also that Liz and Jean Sagal, they've gone on to like their writers, their directors, like they've been very involved in television for all these years. They just went behind the camera instead. And so I feel like they would say, let's take our old series, but let's take a different tact on it. We need a prestige television version of Double Trouble that's going to stream on Max. We're going to go pitch it to HBO. All right. And I feel like the YA franchise, we don't have another Hunger Games right now. And it feels like people need something along those lines. So taking place in the near future, population control has been instituted. The law states that any set of twins, triplets, other multiple births, only one child can remain alive. And Art Foster rebels against this oppression. He and his wife did not agree with it, but his wife dies giving birth to their twin daughters, Catherine and Allison. And so Art takes them on the run, and he ends up raising them amongst kind of this underground rebel society. They're working slowly to take down the system, but like, you know, they're just living off the grid essentially. But when the girls turn 16, they're getting tired of this like kind of safe, nice paradise. They hear these stories about what's going on in the outside, these cities that exist, all these things. And so they decide just for a day, they're going to sneak out and see, right? And so what they realize, though, are the shocking realities of this fascist society that rules the world. And they are starting to get recognized in public, and they realize they have to hide their twin looks. So they each take on a different kind of look and persona. But then what happens is they decide to stay a little bit longer, and they can't get back to where they're from. And they start getting help from these different groups. But like one twin trusts this group, the other twin trusts this group, and they start drifting apart between the episodes to the point where Kate is taken in by like the glitz and glamour of this ruling class. So she joins up with these people who are the oppressors, while Allie ends up wanting to help the poor and help the people of the city like realize you can have more. Look where we live, you know, this is what we believe, all those things. So eventually it's kind of like the climax is the sisters are pit against each other by their new goals and alliances. It's twin against twin. But you ask yourself, how different have they really become? Will they be reunited against a greater foe, or will there be only one? Double Trouble on Max, limited series.
I have one note. that it can't be called Double Trouble. It's got to be called something like A Quiver of Arrows and Swords, but it'll colloquially be known as Quiver. And then like only the Wikipedia entry will betray based on the 80s sitcom Double Trouble. And everybody be like, "What?"
Or it's just called DT and you don't know why. But either way, I feel like to appeal to a new generation, if you're trying to bring in a younger audience, it's got to have kind of this edge to it, and it's got to feel rebellious, and it's got to feel like, oh, there's drama, these sisters, they should be together. But are you team Kate or are you team Allie? You know, and you go to that, which by the way, this whole time when they're calling each other Kate and Allie, I'm like, there was a show called Kate and Allie on the air at the time. How could that be?
Which hopefully we'll get to.
Yeah, one of these days.
But I'm over here like, why would they call it Double Trouble when there is no dance studio and they are not in New York City?
Two different takes. If you guys have an idea out there as well, I'd be curious to hear what all our loyal listeners have to say about the show doctor concept for Double Trouble. What was it missing? What did you want to see more of?
An audience.
But yeah, so again, like you say, now that we've uncovered the reality, the most likely reason why we're never going to get a 2-season DVD set, we'll just have to live with what we have. But now let's look to the future, because we have another little bit of Double Trouble on the way, Will. We have a 2-episode series that we're going to launch into, and that is The Tick. All right, now here is a series based on an obscure comic book that became a fairly popular cartoon series, which then mutated into a live action series just a few years after that cartoon was canceled. So we are going to get into those two shows from the 90s and early 2000s. So we hope that you will join us. Yeah, I'm sure you remember one of them. Maybe you remember both. But either way, it's going to be a fun exploration into the world of this big blue superhero and his moth sidekick. Anyway, I am curious, Will, anything going on right now that you want to promote? Anywhere you want to point people?
Yes, I have a Mindy Cohn guest starring appearance over on Adam's other podcast, Wizards, the podcast guide to comics, where I was on episode 107 and 107.5. So those came out. So yeah, if you like this kind of banter, but about year 2000 era comics, find those episodes. Also, westweekever.com. I do some blogging. At William B. West, I do some social mediaing, and that's all I got.
Yeah, well, we should say, too, that you were also on some special episodes of the After Lunch podcast. So you got to participate there as well during your recent trip to the C2E2 convention. So if you can't get enough William Bruce West, it is out there for you.
Yes, because that episode, the first C2E2 episode came out last week, and then this week is an episode I really, really, really loved. You got to check it out. We played a game. It's a live recording of this game. It's called Monkey Robot Michael Caine. And the gist of the game is you're given a property, usually a movie, maybe a TV series, and you have to decide what would make it better. A monkey, a robot, or Michael Caine. And it's a lot of fun. You'll be playing it with your friends and family. So definitely check that out. That's the After Lunch podcast, wherever you find fine podcasts.
Yeah, it's a hilarious episode. You should check it out. It's great. I also had a guest appearance. One of our listeners out there, shout out to Caleb, invited me to be the first guest on his new podcast. And I was like, wow, okay. It's called Insert Reference Here. And it is basically kind of a retro pop culture podcast. He is younger than us, but he loves old TV and old sitcoms, and he researched it. So he said, hey, would you come on and we're each going to pitch our network? What would our cable network be? What would we do with it? What's the programming we want to put into the world? Original or just our lineups for what we want to show on there? So it was very fun. I unfortunately, by the time we got recording, I had to go to work, so I only had a half hour. So I got my pitches in up top, and you can hear my thoughts, but they are very, very relevant to our podcast. So it's something to look for. Again, that's the Insert Reference Here podcast, which should be out by the time you are hearing this episode. So you can just search on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere you get your podcasts and see if you like the vibe over there. It was a fun opportunity to have some conversation about old TV. But in the meantime, we want to talk to you on social media. So find us at Remember Show Pod on the socials. In the meantime, we will be looking out for you to tell us, is there anything else that you want us to talk about? We're always open to suggestions. We always like to hear. We have our spreadsheet, but if you have something you're dying to hear us talk about and discover, we are willing to take suggestions. But hey, until next time, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.